Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I want to say a quick thank you to everyone who's following us on Spotify and on social media. And thank you for coming back for another episode. Our guest today is Kasper-Rose. We had a really interesting conversation. We went through quite a lot of topics, including being a transmasculine makeup artist, the importance of community, and gender-neutral parenting, among others. So, jam-packed episode today. I hope you enjoy it. Here it is. Hello and welcome to Euphoric, the podcast discussing gender euphoria and what it means to different people. Today we have Kasper-Rose to talk about their experience. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So could you just start by explaining to the listeners what gender euphoria is?
The way I see gender euphoria for myself is pretty much just feeling like at home in my gender identity and the way that I express it. And it's just sort of a feeling of complete comfort and contentment in my gender, really.
That's great, thank you. And do you remember the first time you experienced gender euphoria?
The first time I experienced gender euphoria was probably around the age of 7 or 8. When I was younger, I used to, I called it cross-dressing at the time. I used to like dress in boys' clothes and I do my makeup like in a masculine way, maybe draw on some facial hair and like do some contouring and stuff. And I would like look at myself in the mirror and just sort of feel like, oh, that's how I'm supposed to look. And I didn't really understand like why I felt that way, and obviously in retrospect I know that that was gender euphoria.
Great, that's a really good explanation of it as well. So what kind of makeup and clothes help you to feel gender euphoria?
I feel like nowadays I like to sort of look a bit like a rectangle. Like I like sort of baggy clothes, like long dresses and long skirts, and anything that's sort of like, what's my body shape? Nobody will ever know. It's my own little secret.
You have like quite a big following on social media where you share kind of like your outfits and like your makeup. How would you say it's important to share?
I think being a trans makeup artist, especially a transmasculine makeup artist, I find it important to give myself a presence on the internet because when I was growing up, I never saw anybody that I sort of related to online, and all of the makeup artists that I looked at were all sort of like cis straight female, and I just didn't relate to that at all. So I feel like if I can help even one person realize that it's okay to express your gender however you want, then that's what's important to me.
That's great. Do you have any kind of inspiration, like people that inspire you?
I'm really inspired by like musicians of the 1980s, where it was all sort of like blurred lines of gender, like Prince and David Bowie and people like that. And nowadays I feel like I'm probably my biggest fashion inspiration. Like I like to build on looks that I've done before, and I'm also inspired by all of the trans and queer friends that I have.
That's great. Would you say having kind of trans and queer friends and having that community is very important?
Yeah, definitely. I think it helped me sort of put into words the way that I was feeling. My best friend is trans, and I feel like if I hadn't had him growing up, I probably wouldn't have realised that I was trans as soon as I did. And also having trans and queer friends now, as I'm like openly out as trans and everything, it helps me to like have a community where I can just freely talk about my gender and my experience of gender and just sort of feel no judgment, which I always feel a little bit from cis het people, where I talk about like how I'm transmasculine but I like to present sort of feminine, and when I talk with my trans friends I just don't feel any of that judgment.
Yeah, do you feel like there's kind of a lot of taboos around talking about gender?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like people have this expectation of people that you can easily be put into a box, and when somebody can't easily be put into that box, I think it makes a lot of people really uncomfortable, and then they tend to respond with, well, in a not very nice way, because their confusion, they sort of deflect it, and then they tell trans people that they're confused, but like, I'm not confused about myself. I'm far from confused, but when people feel confused about the way that I choose to express my gender, they like to deflect that onto me.
Yeah, how do you think this kind of problem with putting people in boxes, how do you think we can kind of help solve that?
I just feel like people need to be more open-minded. I think it would be really great to see more like non-binary trans people in the media, in popular media. I think people like Demi Lovato and Sam Smith coming out as non-binary, I think that's really helped people sort of open their minds to the fact that not all non-binary people look the way that you expect them to.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have any other moments of gender euphoria in your life that stand out?
Well, most recently I started testosterone in June, and from then to now it's just been like gender euphoria all day, every day, because like all the changes are happening that I'm happy with, and it makes me feel like I can sort of expand myself in like I don't feel so uncomfortable expressing feminine now, whereas before I went on testosterone I would always feel that little bit of like a voice in my head from all those people who were like, you can't be trans and look like that. Whereas now I'm like, well, I'm on T now, so what are you going to say about it?
So there's a lot of stuff in the news about kind of gender neutral parenting and things like that. Do you think that's a good way to raise kids? Do you think that's helpful?
I think there's a lot of misinformation about gender neutral parenting. A lot of people think it's like forcing they them pronouns onto your children and making them dress in a gender neutral way. But the way that I see it is just allowing your children to express their gender in a completely free way and allowing them to dress however they want and play with whatever toys they want, and just sort of listening to your children if they tell you that the way you're referring to them is wrong, because kids know themselves so much more than we give them credit for.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think there's a lot we can kind of learn from kids in terms of...
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they're smarter than we think.
For sure.
Do you have any kind of tips for parents on like ways they can raise their child in a way that's more gender neutral and comfortable for them?
Well, I grew up with parents who were super accepting of everything that I did, and nothing I ever did I was never told that it was wrong or that it wasn't right for my gender, or that like I played with the Barbies and I climbed trees, and there was no judgment. And I feel like that really helped me when it came to like coming out sexuality and gender wise. I didn't feel like there would be any judgment because my parents have always like listened to me first, and they've always allowed me to tell them who I am rather than them telling me who I am.
That sounds good. So would you say that that gender euphoria or gender dysphoria has played more of a role in you discovering who you are?
If you'd asked me this question 4 years ago, I probably would have said dysphoria, because I felt the need to put myself into that like very dysphoric trans person box because of the like sources that I had around me. But now, and sort of looking back on my transition, I feel like it's definitely more defined by euphoria, because it's less like I feel bad looking this way and people referring to me this way, and more I just feel so much better looking this way and people referring to me this way. So I feel like gender euphoria is way more important. I feel like we should put less focus on dysphoria, because not everybody feels dysphoria, but all trans people feel euphoria, because we all feel better when we're in like the gender that we feel most comfortable in.
Yeah, do you think in like the media and the news and stuff there's too much of a focus on dysphoria?
Way too much, and that definitely feeds into like access to trans healthcare and that sort of thing, because a lot of non-dysphoric trans people, which that's so silly that that's even a term, but a lot of trans people that don't feel dysphoria often don't end up getting the treatments that they need, because you kind of have to prove that you are so miserable the way that you are for them to give you the things that would make you feel better. But like, we're not all miserable, and I feel like people try and pin being trans as this like completely sufferable existence that you just can't escape. But like, I feel like if we just listen to more trans people who don't experience dysphoria, I feel like people would understand that euphoria is so important in the trans experience.
What would you say about your identity kind of gives you the most joy, like whether that's like an action or whatever?
I feel like since I stopped, because I used to identify as male and now I'm more sort of non-binary, genderqueer, and I think making that switch and sort of listening to myself really helped me to feel more free, and I feel just so much less confined by the labels of gender.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It was great having you. And thank you for listening. This has been Euphoric. You can follow us on Instagram at euphoric.podcast for updates. And join us next time to listen to another guest discuss their gender euphoria experience.